Yep.
Um,
You remember where we were? I kind of need to make sure.
we're on the Eldorian Empire.
Eldhildinian.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to pronounce that, are you?
Nope.
Okay.
The EE Empire. I'm gonna say that then. That works.
Okay.
What is the nation's overall disposition?
Um, they're very military, even without even not going into the actual power. They are very militarily oriented. I don't know how else to say it. It's like, I would. Let me really define. It's like they're almost. They're like very. It's hard to say. They're very. They're not so much like there are nations where they have. They're very military. I don't have to say. They're very oriented around the military. It's like they have like a. Then there's the way they're ruled, which is I think it's the next one. Yeah, that's what I thought it was. I'm gonna get the doc up actually.
What type of government is the nation ruled by?
Right. There it is. Okay, so very much they don't have so much. They do have a government, but it's a bit hard to say. It's a typical like king, queen, or anything like that almost, or like anything similar to what we normally think of as government. It's more like a society-wide chain of command or something like that. I don't know what else to call it.
Okay.
There is no like, because it's like the military rules, but it's also not.
Yeah.
It's hard to. It's basically, the whole society is built around the military
Gotcha.
and supporting the military, and anyone who doesn't is most likely, if they don't have some sort of support for the military, or it's hard to say. I wouldn't say it like that, but maybe there's a lot of military dominance in that in the way that society is ruled.
Gotcha.
And even in the way they look at the way the society is. It's not like they're they're not as free as some of the other nations. They hint plus I don't know how to say it. It's a weird way to think of. It's kind of like the Wolven Empire, where there's like a set sort of way they think that is actually very much the way the nation is built on. Almost like, as I said,
Right.
the Wolven Empire, it's like a pack mentality. But Eldudinian Empire, it kind of is similar idea, but it's a different thing. It's like anyone who's of authority, then they're going to listen to orders from them.
Gotcha.
Basically, it's kind of like that. I don't know how to say it.
Gotcha. So.
And they're very dependent on others in that society. But still, you get the idea. It's very, very military oriented society.
So how stable is the nation during the events of?
Pretty darn stable. I mean, in terms of conquest, they're not going to be getting conquered very easily, but there definitely are ways you could do it, but not. But either way, and the biggest disadvantage they have is they don't have any way to use magic against their opponents.
Mm-hmm.
Like they like physically their people cannot use magic, and even if they could, they don't use it in the same way that the other races do. They can't cast spells with it or do anything like that.
Gotcha.
Heck, they can't even enchant stuff with their magic. So the only thing they can really do with it is enhance themselves.
So are they
physically.
eternally stable then?
I would say yes, because of the fact that they're so militarily oriented. It's like they have that, as I said, society-wide chain.
So they're not really safe. I mean, they're safe to pretty much conquer then.
Yeah, as I said, yeah.
And then, how powerful is the nation?
Pretty powerful, I would say, because now they don't usually get involved in other nations' affairs as much. Like they don't go into they don't go into war with many our nations that often.
Mm-hmm.
Even when there's allies of theirs that are fighting in those wars, they don't normally do that. They're very isolationist. Probably one of the most, I wouldn't say one of the most, but they're close. They have a lot. They do a lot of isolating themselves.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yggdrasil.
Yeah. You have some weird.
Oh, the next one's even worse. It's Eskiana.
I could kind of think.
You can figure that one out, but it's a little bit different,
Yeah.
difficult in some ways because it's not so much an E. It's like not an Iana. It's not Iana. It's Yana.
Yana, yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yep. Okay. So yeah, we're on the Y one now.
Yep.
Yep. So it's their disposition.
They're very theocratic. They are very religious. If it's just so you know what that means,
Yeah.
I guess. They're probably the most religious on this entire planet.
Oh.
Even though the next one after is, you could argue is because but that's more like, they literally have that, our nation has literal contact with gods. So it's not, this one doesn't so much have that because they worship something that technically isn't a god.
Yeah.
It's a magic tree thing, but or beyond that, it's.
So they're magic tree huggers.
Pretty much.
Doesn't that kind of sound like it? They're
It kind of
magic tree
does. I mean, the thing is, it's a sentient tree, but there's more to. It's in a way, it's sentient. It's not completely just a tree, and it's one tree too.
huggers. Oh,
It's one very specific tree. It's not just in general trees like that, but I mean, in this tree is literally what their whole nation is like. They're an island nation that is built. The entire island they're situated on
Mm-hmm.
is built upon the roots of that tree. That is how big that tree is.
Oh,
That's
that's a huge tree.
a huge tree, yes. But yeah.
Thing in Fallout, there is one human tree.
Oh God.
I did not study there.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's go on to the next question.
Okay.
Very, as you said,
Yeah.
theocracy, but.
So what type of government?
Definitely a
is the nation
theocracy,
by?
but it's a bit also. It's kind of like a mix of a pure blend of just theocracy, which is ruled by God or whatever,
Yep.
and a democracy. They do have the power to vote. Some of the citizens, like for certain things,
Mm-hmm.
but for the most part, it's a theocracy. I'd say it's not in terms of who rules, but even that said, it's not usually that much. It's usually pretty much a blend of democracy and theocracy.
Okay. How stable is it during the events?
At one point in the series, there is a thing that happens there, and it's a pretty big conflict. Like, the entire island is at stake because the tree that their island is formed on is at stake of being destroyed, basically. Oh. And we're recording again. Okay.
Okay. We were on their. How stable is the nation?
Pretty stable because they're very isolated. They are quite a distance from pretty much the majority of the nations on the Ozarvis.
So this one's more isolated than
Definitely
any of the other
most
ones?
of them. Like the Eldildinian Empire is, it's not necessarily, it's on the same side of the planet as most of the nations, but it's its own island
Okay.
too. But it's a fair distance from most of the mainland, but it's still on the same side of that planet. Whereas the Eskiana and Yggdrasil are both pretty far.
Okay.
They're on like the opposite side. They're the only two that are really on the opposite side of the planet. The Uranolia after that one, or I think I haven't said how it's pronounced, but currently I think it's gonna be Uranolia actually. But either way,
Okay.
that's the last one. But you know,
Yeah.
but as for Yggdrasil, they are very isolated, so safe from conquest, at least by most of the nations. Maybe not so much the dragons, which is Eskiana, but I'm not sure about. I wouldn't think the dragons will do that.
Yeah.
As for eternally stable, I would definitely say yes. It's like there's some. Now I will admit there is some issues I have, and there are some, but for the most part, it's very internally stable. Like there are some characters in the series who are from Yggdrasil, but have conspired against it. You know, but.
Right.
Those characters are very not common. You know what I mean? They're very uncommon in terms of the majority of the population of English Ireland.
How powerful is the nation though?
Pretty powerful. I mean, also not though, because they have defenses around their entire island that they've set up because they can manipulate plants. Those people. But thing is, they don't have as they have magic, yes, but they don't have much magic. Some iron races. They have more than the L210, which is the Elven Empire, obviously, but
Right.
they don't have as, but they can use magic. It's just they don't have as much of an ability to use it as some of the other ones do. But yeah, okay,
Okay, and then we're on the Esquiana.
Esquiana. Yep.
Okay. So what is their overall disposition?
They are. It's almost. They aren't very much of an. It's hard to call them a nation because they aren't very organized in terms of yes, they're dragons because
Oh.
partly because they're dragon, the race that there's dragons, but also because it's not so much just that though, because they don't have as much of a reason. They don't have. They have a reason. They just don't do as like they're. It's more one whoever's it's more everyone is for them. One for I cannot talk. I can't even think of what I'm trying to say here. Everyone's out for themselves for the most part in that nation. It's not as much of a nation as you would think of as being a nation because they're not very united at all. But they also are because families in that the families of those of each every family is kind of united amongst themselves. But even that said, it's not like parents and children obviously are going to be united
Right.
together.
Right.
But
Families are going to be united together.
but I wouldn't say it's like the actual two different families aren't as united as the people within each of those two families
Yeah.
or dragons. You know what I mean? But still, get the idea. And that's one thing I will say is that's the main flaw with Escan in terms of their power, which we'll get. And that's one of the main things that makes them not as powerful as they could be is they don't have as much union together.
Oh, okay.
They are not as much of a united nation. They have the family each family but not as much unity between each family individually or separately. You know what I mean?
Right. So the type of government.
I definitely wouldn't say anarchy because they do have rulers, but it's more of a It's not rulers, council, but
Right.
the council doesn't do much. They don't do much. They just kind of exist.
Yeah.
Basically.
Well, yeah, because it kind of sounds.
It sounds like it's just kind of animals almost.
Yeah.
They aren't. They do have not completely, but you know what I mean. They have enough.
They have like human and.
They have enough to be recognizable as a nation.
Right.
But they aren't. But they aren't quite to the point of they aren't as much of a nation as most nations are because they aren't that united and they aren't very much. They just don't have that structure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now we're on to our next question.
So how stable?
Even if they're not united that much, they are without question one of the most powerful. Not quite as powerful as some of the other ones,
Right.
because of the lack of unity. But they are very powerful still because of how powerful. And how in terms of conquest, at least we're talking here. But
Right.
in terms of conquest, we're they are not gonna ever be easy to conquer because honestly, even though they have been known to have connections with literal gods.
Yeah.
They've actually even in the past they actually went to war with those before they were gods, but when they were still ridiculously powerful for being mortal characters. The Cuneivi is what they were called back then.
Oh, okay.
But those would be the gods that I'm talking about. But the thing is, they didn't have as much of a chance as they could have, but it was a long enough conflict where you could definitely say
Right.
they definitely had a chance. It's just not as much. They didn't, but in the long run, they weren't going to win. There was no way they were going to win that conflict.
Yeah, it kind of doesn't seem like they were gonna win it no matter what.
They just weren't like even if they tried their best, but even that said, there was no way they were winning the war long term. It was they got some victories, I will say that, but not in terms of they weren't taking the Cunevae down.
Yeah.
And this was actually, as I said, that war happened before, but either way.
Yeah.
In terms of internally stable, as I said, they're not united very well, so they're not going to be very stable in terms of internally, but
Keep going. So
Yep.
how powerful is the nation then?
Very. As I said, one of the most powerful nations on the entirety of Ozarvis. They aren't as powerful as the Unal Empire, but they're probably the second most powerful, just because of how powerful each individual is.
Right.
They aren't very united, but they are very powerful individually, so they could do if they wanted to, they could do a lot to the Unal Empire.
Yeah.
But, yeah, other than that, they're not doing as much as, you get the idea.
Yeah. Wouldn't it make more sense though, like, I mean, I understand they're like powerful individually and stuff, but they're not really united. So, wouldn't it be beneficial for that community though to be more united? You know what I mean?
I mean, I'm not saying they're not
make them like a united front. You know what I mean? That
Yeah,
way
they've done that in the past, but in the more recent times, a lot of that has kind of been like the Society of the Dragons has kind of gone down
Gotcha.
in terms of how united they are. It's not they used to be more united, but over time it's kind of they've lost a lot of unity.
Gotcha.
Okay. So now we're on to
The
Uronilia.
Yeah. Okay. So what is the nation's overall disposition?
They are one of the only nations. They are basically the only nation, like actual legitimate nation, on the entire planet of Ozarvis.
Okay.
On at least their side of the planet, which is the main side of the side of the planet that almost every other nation's on.
Right.
But they are the only nation where Eltilton, Lagunals, and Heffians, which, as I said, were the wolves and the Destralian and all that. Yeah, the Heffians, they are the only nation where those three races live together in harmony.
Really?
They are the only nation.
Wow.
Literally, there's no other way to say it. They are the only one, and they're even ruled by all three because. Not like you have a council that's literally made up of an equal number of each race.
Well, that's like really, really good though, and everything like that. That way they can all live together and.
Yeah, that's the thing. The one thing I will say, Uronilia isn't very powerful though. So we're moving, and its government, as I said, is the council, but.
Yep.
So we're kind of just going
all
over it, yeah, basically. But Uronilia's power is not very high. They have a lot more harmony between each of the races that lives there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I wouldn't say they're very powerful because if the Lugulan Empire or even some of the other ones like the Wolfen Empire probably would be able to take them out.
Right.
Easily in a war, because for one thing, they don't have that many people. There aren't many of the Lagunals, especially, but the Heffians too, and even the Elthulton, who would be willing to live in harmony with the other two races. Because, as I said, this is the only nation on the entire planet that is like that. And if you brought the other nations in, they're not going to approve of this nation's existence. They're going to try to take it out.
Right.
Most of them, at least. There are some, but not all. But most of them are not going to like the existence of Uronilia.
Right.
So, as I said, they're not going to be able to fight very well against even like Bostrel, which, as I said, was not that powerful. Probably
one of the least powerful.
Yeah, it was on the lower end.
Mm-hmm.
But Uronilia is a very there's people who want a nation like Urunelia to exist, but they don't. But the actual ruling people in each of those nations isn't gonna want that nation to exist because you get the idea.
Right. So they're safe to conquer and.
No, they would be very screwed if someone tried to conquer them. They're
Yeah, because everything is on there. And
everyone is
like,
against them.
Yeah.
And
So-
even if they're, that's why Urunelia actually tried for tens of thousands of years. And I'm not joking here. They've existed that long, but they've been trying all that time to make sure they aren't found.
Right.
Their location is not known even to the Union Empire. Heck, the Union Empire thought they were a myth.
Yeah.
Created because people wanted peace between each of the races and to end it.
Right.
To end all that discrimination. But Urunelia is like so that's one of the so that really shows how well Urunelia managed to hide. But even that said, they can't rely on that forever. There was because when you think about it, you can't hide forever on a planet with limited space, and other nations that might want to try to get that space. You can't hide forever on a planet like this. I mean, if you move to another planet, you might be able to, but that's going to be even more difficult considering this is not like
Yeah, it's not exactly like a state-to-state type thing. They're like universes away from each other.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, no, you know what I mean? Like state to state and everything like that.
Yeah.
Like border to, you know what I mean? Like
There's
borders.
some that have borders, but for the most part, each nation is. It's not technically speaking. Some nations There's some nations like Bostral, Australia, the Wolven Empire, and the Union Empire all share borders, but the rest of them are almost all islands or have the entire continent to themselves.
Right. So
for example, Skiana has literally an entire continent to itself. Actually, supercontinent, by the way.
Right. So
but
so
then
that's
the
what I'm
Union
saying.
Empire. But still, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So I mean, it's not like the United States. You know what I mean? Like
Where
like,
each state has borders with another one.
Right.
It's not, and I wouldn't say it's completely like that because, as I said, there are
there's some of them.
There's 4 of them have shared borders with each other, but not all of them. I mean, Bostral's in the north, Australia's in the south, but Australia and Bostral don't share a border. But
right.
they are very, but they do share a border with the Union Empire and with the Wolven Empire. But still, you get the idea.
Yeah.
So there are, but still, you get the idea. But for the most part, the nations on Ozarvis don't have any borders with each other. But still, you get the idea. Now,
So
Urunelia is still pretty stable in terms of internally.
Yep.
Because, as I said, harmony.
Yeah.
Harmony in that nation is very powerful.
Which is huge.
It's a big deal. It's one of the most. It's probably one of the most stable nations on Ozarvis because of it, even almost.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some that are close, like the Wolven Empire, maybe, because the Wolven Empire, they got the pack mentality.
Right.
But as far as harmony, a pack mentality isn't as much as you get at. Isn't going to be
because
much.
Yes, the pack has like the
Right. Exactly.
but one can turn on another in the pack and
and
then it can cause chaos.
But if you have a true harmony, you're not going to see that anywhere near as easily.
Right.
Um.
And that is.
Yeah, but the one thing I will say, there are plans for like a story where there is an individual who happens to just come to your Urunelia and it makes
Chaos.
Makes chaos because they think they were playing a game pretty much. They were like, let's see how long I can last in this nation with making them think I actually am for this nation's purpose.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah, that's what Urunelia is like.
Good deal.
Yep. So, yeah.
That was really cool. I'm glad I
Yep.
I'm glad you talked to me about that and everything like that.
Yeah.
And like found out a whole bunch of information on the nations. That's really cool.
Yeah, you're welcome. And that's it for this series. So there we go.